And good morning and welcome to Book Club Corner. Thank you for being here with us, viewers in Trinidad and Tobago and across the Caribbean. Thank you for joining us today. I am Jewel Greene, and of course, this is Book Club Corner, where every Wednesday, right here on Tobago Updates, we talk to authors about their books, about the literary arts, and their love for the written word. And today we have with us a very special guest. He is the co-founder of the Slammer Sports Club. He is the founder of the Tobago Voice, founding editor of the Tobago Voice, as well as he is the chairman of the Norman McNeil Family Foundation. Let me tell you, he is quite a busy guy, and he by trade is a chemical engineer. We'll let him tell you about that. Welcome to Book Club Corner, Mr. O'Neil.
Thank you, Ms. Greene, and to the Tobago Updates listening audience.
Yes. We want to get into this book. He has written a book called The Analytical History of Tobago. And let me tell you, guys, this book is full of information. We have to get into this today. We have so much to talk about. We want to get into it quickly. But before we do that, you know how we do it on Book Club Corner. We have some wine, and I want to thank our very kind sponsors. We have Neve from Eye for Design, and he gives us a centerpiece every Wednesday, a new centerpiece. And this one is lovely, 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 with some ginger lilies and ferns and a different breed of sunflowers. It's simply gorgeous. Eye for Design is in Lowlands, Tobago, and you can give them a call to make your order of flowers, interior design, wedding. They do events as well. And we want to thank Me and Rich Wines for their sponsorship of this Tara wine that we will be sipping today for our libation. Mr. O'Neil, cheers to you.
Cheers to you.
And to your health.
Thank you so much.
We do the 5 S's of wine tasting on Book Club Corner. And the 5 S's are that we see the wine. So we look at it for clarity, right? We swirl the wine. We look at the legs, the sugar content. We sniff the wine. So fruity.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we sip and savor. This one, you have to take your time with this one. Take your time, Mr. O'Neil. And you all will know why I said that. Mr. O'Neil, I saw your name is Mervyn J. O'Neil. And I said, wait, he has the same first initials as Michael Jackson. Do you mind if I call you MJ?
I have no problem with that.
I love it. It's such a cute name. I love your name, Mr. O'Neil.
Thank you.
So we want to get into this book. When I looked at the cover of this book, right, I saw a water wheel. And I wondered, what was the significance of you having a water wheel on your book, An Analytical History of Tobago? Tell us about that water wheel.
Okay. There are several water wheels around Tobago. This one actually is the one at Speyside. The significance of the water wheel is that the sugar industry to date is the only true industrial activity that has occurred on Tobago. I mean, we've had agriculture and so forth, but if we go over Tobago's history, the production of sugar and rum, and this started well into the 17th century, because the records indicate that in or around 1666, the Dutch had 6 sugar factories on Tobago. But the real sugar industry began in Tobago after 1764, when in 1770 actually, the first shipment of sugar left Tobago for a port in England called COWES, Cows.
Okay, so you saw this water wheel as a significant I should say, theme in Tobago's history in terms of this was our production.
Yes, it makes a
And I love
statement as far as colonization and Europe was concerned, the sugar and rum industry on Tobago were really the economic things that attracted them and where they put most of their energy. So sugar and Tobago do go hand in hand.
Yes.
Yes.
And as he says that sugar and Tobago go hand in hand, I'll tell you what, because we're sweet. Okay? It's because we're sweet. That is why.
Very good. Very good.
Mr. O'Neil, as I read through your book, MG, as I read through your book, I couldn't go one page, turning a page without finding a chock full of information, just insightful, useful information. This book is so full of information. You know, I wondered, how did you get the time to do all this work? Tell us about the kind of research that you had to do to produce this work.
Okay. Let me underscore that by saying, unknown to many of us here in Tobago, and I would dare say in the region, there is so much more information outside of the island and the region than are in our libraries and so forth where they should belong. Having said that, in around 1983, I had moved to California, and I had finished what I considered my work in science. And so I said, well, okay, let me see what is written about Tobago, just read up on Tobago. And I could find very little. I found a little book by Carlton Ortley. I found, of course, Isles' work that was done in 1867 or thereabout, but thereafter there was very little done. And most of the research for this book was done at the USC Library in Southern California.
Wow.
Now, many of us refer to USC as the Harvard of the West Coast. In fact, most politicians from around the world go to USC to do their studies in foreign affairs.
Okay.
And so USC International Library has lots and lots and lots of information.
So you got some of the information you have in this book from there?
Most of it from there.
Wow, that is amazing. You know, as we talk about, you know, the history of Tobago and information and all of that, you know, we want to just put a plug out there. We need more information on Tobago, on the ground, right here in Tobago. You know, we don't want to have to buy a ticket to go to USC, right, to get this information. And not only that, I mean, Mr. O'Neil has provided that information in his book, An Analytical History of Tobago. So you don't have to go to USC, but, you know, you should not have had to travel to get that information. It should be here in Tobago, and we want to make sure that we get that information here. And we have work to do to make sure that information is accessible right here in Tobago on the island. We had an author some time ago when we now started, I think it was episode 2, Clement Williams, and he has a book he's co-written, and the name of that book is The Disney Film Heritage of Tobago. And in that book, he talks about the film that the Swiss Robinson family film that was filmed here in Tobago. And there was a theme of piracy and all of that. And I read your book. You see all these tags here, people, this book. Let me just tell you, this book full of information. So there is a place in your book here where you talk about how highly organized and clandestine and endeavor piracy was. But then when I flip to the next page, I see that you have a table where all the pirates that are known to have set foot in Tobago are listed. Where did you get this information?
There is a particular book, and I may have it in the bibliography, I'm not sure, but that has all of the pirates of the Caribbean, and it's a whole book. Now, interestingly, what got my attention to in that book, one would be amazed to note that Boise Singh is listed as the last pirate of the Caribbean. Now you understand that book has lots and lots of information. I'm not sure it may be listed.
Let me ask you, as you mentioned Boise Singh. What Boise Singh are you talking about? Because my mother used to be telling me about a Boise Singh when we were growing up as children. Which Boise Singh are you
Boise Singh is the chap who did a lot of murders in Trinidad.
I know.
Was actually, I think he was hanged for murder.
This is the same Boise Singh. Y'all, let me tell you, this Boise Singh, go do your research. He was no joke.
No joke.
Oh my gosh, the stories my mother had to tell us. She was from Caroni and he was from the area, right?
Yes.
So let me tell you, they all knew about him.
Yes.
They knew his family. So she gave me all the tea. We'll talk about that another time.
Correct.
But let me just tell you, this information that you have here about the pirates, I noticed your book, even though, it's a great resource for persons who are doing academic research, it also is a great resource for persons who are doing creative research. If you're writing a film, if you're doing a book on Tobago, you may be talking about a fantasy fictional story about Tobago, and you may need some of this research, because let me tell you, he takes you right back in this book. And he talks about Captain Jean de Casse, Jean de Bont, Captain Bartholomew Roberts, Captain Fenn, Captain Thomas, and there's a long list. And I didn't even know we had all these pirates that had visited Tobago.
Yes.
Wow.
Let me make a quick connection there for you.
Please.
Pirates Bay in Charlottesville is connected there. The pirates were being chased down by the British, and they sought haven in that cove there at Pirates Bay in Charlottesville. Eventually, because of the rainforest, they ran into the rainforest and were able to elude the British Navy that was chasing after them.
Let me tell you guys, Tobago has a history that is every creative, every author, every fiction author's dream. Authors, I'm putting out a catcall, a bat signal to all authors across the world. Get here to write. There is a great creative energy and vibe in Tobago. I'm telling you, you need to get to Tobago if you want to write that bestseller book. This is where it's at, guys. I want to talk about, because we don't want to miss one thing. I tell you, I have stickies, guys. I have stickies in the book. There is a part in your book where you talk about the first treaty of Paris.
Yes.
And I know you said there are 3 of them.
Yes.
3 or 4? It's 3?
There were 3.
3 treaties of Paris. But this first one where you talk about, how significant it is to Tobago, I want you to tell our viewers about that and why it is actually significant to Tobago.
All right. Tobago was colonized by Europe for the first time in around 1634. And that lasted, as we call it, the first colonization. That ended in around 1777 when there was the French-Dutch War right here in Scarborough. After that, Tobago was considered a hands-off nation, a hands-off colony. In fact, I don't know the connection between no man's land, and I have a chapter in this book. You
do?
In this book entitled No Man's Land. Anyhow, between 1777 and 1677 and 1760, anyone could come in and go without claiming sovereignty over Tobago. But then, and of course, there were French and British and so forth. And then in 1764, as a result of wars across Europe and so forth, Tobago was included in a treaty between France and England. And in that treaty, France ceded Tobago to the British. Prior to that, it was what we may call no man's land. Anyone entered anywhere, and they fought their wars and so forth.
Right.
And so in 1764, that first Treaty of Paris was signed between Britain and France, ceding Tobago to the British. And it is from that, we may call that the second colonization of Tobago, out of which the sugar industry and everything came. It took us all the way up to, we may even say, 1962, when the British finally gave us independence.
MJ, you have a vault up here. It's just open it, unlock it, and just information and date. Let me tell you, I would love to have had your brain when I was doing my history exams. You see how easy just pulling dates on it. My God. Anyway, I tell you, when I look at this this section on that first Treaty of Paris,
yes.
right? And it talks. So I saw that was really the pivotal. The point in history that ended that 7-year war.
Yes,
that
correct.
Anglo-French war.
Correct.
And to think that at that time, that is when the British were awarded Tobago. So that is how we ended up in the British hands, right?
Yes.
And, that's significant because we look forward.
Yes.
We now start to talk about emancipation and independence and all of those things and how it affected and affected Tobago's
Okay, so let me go
situation.
a bit into that. Yes, Tobago was ceded to the British in 1764 by the first Treaty of Paris. But as fate would have it, by 1783, the French attacked the British on Tobago and captured the island.
Right.
And they held it for 10 years until 1793. And it is then through that second Treaty of Paris that again Tobago fell back into British hands from the French. But the treaty that placed Tobago permanently in British hands occurred in 1814. We'll call it Third Treaty of Paris. And that with Napoleon and all his matters in Europe and so forth. Because note, Tobago's history is tied into European history. I think that's one of the points I try to make with this work. Tobago, we heard Tobago changed hands 30 odd times, and the British were here, the French were, but it was never an isolated matter. In fact, I point out that even the Americans were trying to capture Tobago as a result of the war in England, in America. They had sent a ship down to capture Tobago from the British because the French and the British had sided against, the French and the British were at war over the United States. They were on one side of the war, the other. And they did send a ship to capture Tobago. Actually, the British sunk it off of Barbados.
Let me say, this is such a treat, guys. I'm a history buff as well. Such a treat and such a special time with this book, An Analytical History of Tobago, for me to get into this with MJ. It's so sweet. Let me tell you, there is, when we look at the history of Tobago, when we look at, all the different ups and downs and nuances, and we look at this Treaty of Paris. I was in a workshop last Saturday, and we were talking about international law, right? And how, effective it is to islands and countries in terms of creating a kind of roll-down effect to their local laws, right? And the question came up, how effective is an international law and by extension a treaty? Because we see that with this first treaty, the French still came and captured Tobago from the British, even though they had all decided, right, through that treaty, that they would honor this decision that, Tobago would be in the hands of Britain.
Correct.
So all of these things are so apropos to the discussion that we're having today in Tobago. Because, guys, we're having a discussion. It's everywhere. Every time you look around, we're having a discussion about these two themes, especially now, right? Secession, autonomy, the air bridge, the sea bridge, transport, goods and services. What is Tobago? Where is Tobago? Where is the Marine Board? All of these things we're having conversations about. And you have a chapter here, chapter 14, right? Annexation. And we have to get into that. Let me tell you, this chapter was so sweet. So I was looking at your chapter 14, annexation. And in chapter 14, you have here on page 248, right? Something you term the 4 waves of abandonment for Tobago, right? And when I looked at that, I just thought to myself, I said, wow, this was so amazing. Let me just run through this quickly with you guys. So MJ talks about the 4 waves of abandonment for Tobago. And he says the first wave, right? Because they were unable to profit from unenforceable labor, the planters entered into sharecropping arrangements with their ex-slaves, left their plantations in the hands and care of agents, or turned their back entirely on the island. That was wave number 1. Wave number 2, guys, a second wave of abandonment occurred through investments, which were reduced, then dried up. Right? No financier stepped in to fill a vacuum left by the bankruptcy of the island's main financier. That was the wave number 2. And then you have wave number 3 of abandonment. This occurred when the entrepreneurial edge left the island as planters handed it back to the British Crown in 1876. And the fourth and final wave that you have listed here, and continuing, you said. So this 4th wave hasn't finished.
No.
You said that this 4th wave is continuing, where occurred that the island and its people were tied to an undefined annexation with Trinidad. The West Indies was abandoned in pursuance of the new economic focus, but Tobago was abandoned as part of the West Indian story, but also in a further relegation behind Trinidad. So we see here that you're talking about not just the abandonment of Tobago, but the entire abandonment of the West Indies as a viable economic option to bring revenue to the colonial masters. And that's one of the reasons when we talk about independence, we see that that was one of the reasons that led to them, letting us go very quickly, right? And guys, I'm just going to drop a nugget here for you all, right? A lot of people are wondering, every time we ask for autonomy or we talk about secession or whatever, why doesn't Trinidad let us go since we don't have anything? They say we don't produce anything. No, I am being the devil's advocate. Please don't come for me. And they ask these questions. And I always say, if something is not worth anything, you don't want it.
Correct.
Okay? So that's the answer to your question. I'll just leave that nugget with you. Let's think about that, right? But Mr. O'Neil, I want you to read for us, because I tell you, we love to be read to in Backup Corner. And there is on page 278, he talks about the production figures. Do you have that? 278.
278.
Yes, paragraph 3. Paragraph 3.
After 1945?
Yes, could you read for us that paragraph 1938?
Oh, in 1938, Tobago shipped to Trinidad 3,394,200 pounds of cocoa, 3,465,500 pounds of copra, 1,730,700 coconuts, 6,000 pounds of tobacco, 7,600 gallons of lime oil. Together, these brought in 1,011,753 to the island's economy. In 1945, Tobago shipped to Trinidad sweet potatoes, tanias, plantains, pigeon peas, livestock, and poultry, which brought 230,604 in income to the island. By the dollar value of that period, these were huge amounts. For example, in 1950, an acre of land in Tobago sold for less than $30. In 2015, a lot of primary property in Tobago could fetch in the vicinity of $300,000. In 1950, Tobago shipped 877,681 pounds of sweet potatoes, etc., etc. All of this was enabled by the boat.
This is why I wanted him to read it. I mean, apart from all the figures, let me tell you. So, apart from all the data in here, because we see that Tobago was producing hand over fist.
Yes, it was.
Hand over fist, producing just.
Yeah, it was.
Just releasing every day. I mean, look at these numbers. Tobago is no joke, and enabled by the boat, guys.
The boat.
Shall we speak of that? We have a few minutes before we wrap up, and I want Mr. O'Neil, before he tells us about his foundation, because I want you to get into that before you leave, huh? But I'm going to put you on the spot today. I have a few questions for you, Mr. O'Neil. MJ, tell us, what is your perspective, especially when we look in the context of your book, An Analytical History of Tobago. Could you tell me what your perspective is in terms of probably an autonomy conversation for Tobago, by extension, being the devil's advocate, a secession, because we're hearing the word bandied about. And could you explain to us first what that autonomy means and what secession means, the difference, if you can tell us about that, and tell us what your perspective is in that context.
Let me start as a descendant of the African enslavement experience. I am, in a way, a Pan-Africanist, so I am more about coming together than going apart. I support the Caribbean Federation, which fell apart. I have my views on that. It has to do with personalities and so forth. In fact, I've written a second book, the one on party politics, and I point to these things. Now, where Tobago and Trinidad is concerned, under the annexation arrangement, it was, tied Tobago to Trinidad for economic and political, not for economic, but for political reasons. The British did not want Tobago to stay adrift, and they had an administration in Trinidad, so they tied Tobago to Trinidad politically, but an economic plan has not yet been worked out. Now, much of the talk on autonomy and so forth really has to do with that. Tobago has been in a state of stagnation since 1898, when annexation went into effect. Tobago today gets its budget and allocation from Trinidad. People being what they are, I mean, they take the easy way out. They don't have to work to produce, to make a dollar, to get into an economic arrangement. And so, in a way, the allocation, the annual allocation, is a trap in and of itself if we are not careful.
Right. But I want to know what your perspective is. I want to put you on the spot today.
No.
What do you think?
Well,
is it feasible? So this is gonna short me on. Is it feasible for Tobago to have more autonomy? Does that make sense?
Okay.
What's happening with that?
And bear with me if I don't answer your question in the yes or no fashion.
No problem. Once you bear with me as they put me off the set.
Okay. Now, we have to look at a society as consisting of its politics, its economics, and its psychological disposition of the people. too much has been placed on our politics relative to our economics and our education. Now, having said that, if Tobago's economy was invested in, then the question of autonomy would go away.
Okay. I think that's enough said. As they say in the streets, say less. You have answered the question. Guys, we're out of time. I want to thank you for joining us here on Book Club Corner. Thank you to our guest, Mr. Mervyn O'Neil. Thank you for all the books he has brought. Let me tell you, you see our coffee table display. He has brought some phenomenal work that he's into, the Tobago Voice and the Crossover magazine, and he's bringing back the Tobago Voice, guys. So look out for that next year, he said, right? Mm-hmm. And the Tobago Writers Guild is going to get into that. I'm so enthusiastic. I want to thank our kind sponsors, Neve, I for Design, Main Ridge Wines for their kind sponsorship of our libation today. And Mr. O'Neil is going to just take us out by just letting us know how we can get in contact with him. He has an email address, and you can talk to him about all the information you have heard today. And you can get his books on Amazon, Abe Books as well online, and we're working to get his books in stores locally this week. And I want to thank you, Mr. O'Neil. Quickly, just give me a cheers and just tell the viewers how to find you as we close off Book Club Corner. How can we find you?
All right. I am currently involved with a planning committee on a conference on, as in about Tobago. That conference is due to come off next year. So we are in the planning stages right now. And yes, we are still open to new people who can relate to a conference talking about Tobago. Now, a leading member of that planning committee is the Civil Net NGO.
Awesome.
If you get in touch with the Civil Net NGO, you will find me.
Fantastic. So you heard it from his very own mouth, guys. Check CivilNet if you want to get in contact with Mr. Mervyn O'Neil. Thank you again. Mm-hmm. Tune in next week when we talk to another local author about their book, and we'll let you know who that is on Facebook. Cheers, guys.
Yes. Cheers.